The biggest reason intelligent people fail is not that they aim too low, it is that they aim in too many directions at once. Society teaches you a flattering lie, that you can keep every door open, chase every interesting possibility, stay flexible, remain well-rounded, and still build something exceptional. That is nonsense. A life cannot compound if it is constantly being divided. A fortune cannot be built by scattering attention like dust in the wind. I have watched many people destroy their best years not with stupidity but with mild interest. That is the danger nobody warns you about. Your great enemy is not always distraction in its obvious form. It is often the collection of things you slightly want, the opportunities you half love, the projects you would be happy enough doing, the invitations that flatter your ego, the side roads that do not look dangerous because they are not ugly. They are simply not your road. And the truth is brutal. The things you kind of like are often the very things that murder the things you deeply, desperately want. People imagine failure as a dramatic collapse, a scandal, a bankruptcy, a divorce, a public humiliation. But most failure is quieter than that. It is death by dilution. It is the slow leakage of force. It is a man with talent spending 10 years responding to life instead of directing it. It is a woman with rare gifts, exhausting herself on obligations that look responsible but do not move her toward what matters most. It is the slow surrender of depth in exchange for variety, novelty, approval, and the cheap comfort of telling yourself you are keeping options open. Options can be useful, yes, but too many options turn the mind soft. They prevent commitment. They seduce you into a life of permanent preparation. And permanent preparation is one of the most respectable forms of avoidance. The 5/25 rule is not productivity advice. It is not some clever trick for your notebook. It is a law of life. Write down 25 things you want. Then circle the 5 that matter most. The other 20 are not a waiting room. They are not someday. They are not after I get settled. They are the danger zone. They are the list that must be avoided with extraordinary discipline, because they will steal time, pride, attention, identity, and emotional energy from the 5 things that actually matter. This is what people do not understand. The 20 are dangerous precisely because they are not absurd. If they were ridiculous, you would reject them easily. What makes them lethal is that they are attractive enough to justify. They whisper instead of scream. They feel reasonable. They fit nicely into a story where you can still pretend you are serious. I have spent enough time around ambition to know that most people do not lose because they lack ability. They lose because they never learn the violence of clean exclusion. They want to be the investor and the operator and the public figure and the mentor and the creator and the traveler and the social genius and the great spouse and the fit body and the perfect parent and the non-stop friend and the lifelong student and the man with endless side projects, and the woman who can do it all with grace. They want a life that looks rich in every category, and what they get instead is a life stretched thin across too many surfaces. The world applauds this in the early years. It calls it energy, it calls it promise, it calls it versatility. But eventually the bill arrives. What looked like range turns into fragmentation. What looked like freedom turns into chaos. What looked like abundance turns into mediocrity. If you want an exceptional life, you must learn a truth that feels offensive until it sets you free. You do not become powerful by adding. You become powerful by eliminating. Every meaningful life is built as much by rejection as by pursuit. The steering wheel matters more than the engine. A car with enormous power going in 5 directions is not powerful. It is unstable. A weak man with perfect direction will often outperform a strong man with scattered desire. Focus is not a decorative virtue. It is the architecture of compounding. It is the mechanism by which effort stops evaporating and starts accumulating. So let me give you 5 rules. Not polite suggestions, not motivational wallpaper. Rules. If you understand them, your life will tighten, your money will sharpen. Your time will stop leaking so easily, and perhaps for the first time you will stop mistaking motion for progress. The law of ruthless selection. The first rule is this: if everything matters, nothing matters. That sentence sounds simple, but very few people live as if it is true. They keep too many priorities because priorities make them feel noble. A long list of ambitions allows you to imagine yourself as vast, full of possibility, rich with potential. But possibility is cheap. Execution is expensive. Reality demands subtraction. The 5/25 rule begins with selection, because your future is determined less by what you admire than by what you are willing to exclude. Most people fail here because choosing 5 feels like killing 20 identities. It is not just a practical act, it is an emotional funeral. When you cross out 20 goals, you are not removing tasks from a page, you are confronting the lives you will not live. You are admitting that you cannot become everything. That stings the ego, because the ego feeds on imagined abundance. The ego loves to say, I could do that too. Perhaps you could. That is not the right question. The right question is whether doing it would cost you the thing you want most. I have seen this in business, in careers, in investing, in relationships. A company wants to serve everybody and ends up meaning nothing to anyone. An investor wants every promising opportunity and ends up owning a pile of distractions. A professional says yes to every project and never becomes known for anything that matters. A person wants romance, status, security, adventure, comfort, admiration, and freedom all at once, and then wonders why life feels like a cracked foundation. Gravity always wins. So does dilution. Picture a magnifying glass in sunlight. If the light is scattered, it warms nothing. Focus it into one small point and it burns. Your life works the same way. Intelligence spread across too many ambitions becomes heat without fire. Intelligence concentrated on a few meaningful aims becomes force. That is why your first task is not to work harder. It is to decide what deserves your fire. The practical assignment is severe and necessary. Write down 25 goals. Not fantasies, real goals. Then circle only 5. After that, take the remaining 20 and label them clearly. Avoid at all costs. Do not call them future plans. Do not soften the truth. They are the things most likely to distract you from what you say matters most. Read that list often. It is a map of temptation. The enemy wears a friendly face. The second rule is this: your life is rarely destroyed by what you hate. It is destroyed by what you tolerate, what flatters you, and what you slightly enjoy. People think the enemy must look dark and obvious. They imagine vice arriving with drama. But the real enemy is often pleasant. It offers stimulation. It gives you identity. It lets you feel productive. It gives you stories to tell. It even gives you praise from other people. That is why the 20 abandoned goals are so dangerous. They do not repel you. They charm you. Most people fail here because they misunderstand temptation. They think temptation only means self-destruction in its vulgar form. Laziness, addiction, recklessness. But for ambitious people, temptation is often much cleaner. It looks like an interesting side business, a second degree you do not need, a networking event full of people you do not respect, a half-promising collaboration, an audience you could build, a trip that is good for exposure, a project that feels intellectually exciting but strategically useless, a title, a panel, a rebrand, a new plan every 6 months. None of these things look like cliffs. That is precisely why people walk over the edge so calmly. I have watched men ruin the compounding of a good business because they became bored with repetition and wanted novelty. I have watched women with rare professional momentum slow themselves down by accepting too many respectable side opportunities. I have watched investors destroy returns not by recklessness, but by curiosity with no boundaries. They kept nibbling. They kept diversifying their attention long after it should have been concentrated. Curiosity without discipline becomes appetite. Appetite without direction becomes a leaking bucket. Imagine you are building a bridge across a river. Every day you carry steel, bolts, concrete, and tools to the construction site. Then each evening, out of mild interest, you carry a little of that material somewhere else to start 3 smaller bridges you do not need. None of those side bridges are evil. In fact, each one might be useful in some alternate life, but in this life they are sabotage. And because the damage happens slowly, you keep lying to yourself. I'm making progress everywhere. No, you are making insufficient progress where it counts. The practical warning is this: learn to fear attractive irrelevance. That is the real poison. Ask of every opportunity, if I say yes to this, what am I silently saying no to? Do not answer superficially. The true cost is not the hour on the calendar. The cost is the fragment of identity, momentum, and emotional focus you surrender. If it does not serve your chosen 5, treat it like a threat, no matter how pleasant it looks. Concentration creates financial gravity. The third rule is financial, and people need to hear it without romance. Money compounds only where attention compounds. Scattered lives produce scattered returns. This is true in investing, in skill building, in business, and in reputation. People want financial freedom, but they keep spending their best years in pieces. They touch 10 things lightly and wonder why nothing becomes formidable. Wealth is drawn toward concentration because concentration creates asymmetry. It creates an edge. It creates depth that other people cannot imitate because they are too busy performing activity across a dozen fronts. Most people fail here because they think being busy with money matters is the same thing as building wealth. It is not. You can read market headlines every day, debate macroeconomics at dinner, track 100 companies, chase side hustles, compare strategies, and still have a financial life built on sand. Why? Because you never concentrated long enough to develop judgment. You never stayed with one field, one style, one opportunity, one edge, one business model, one body of knowledge long enough for real insight to take root. You kept resetting the punch card before the value appeared. Compounding is a quiet law. It does not reward drama. It rewards consistency under selective pressure. A good investor does not need constant novelty. A good operator does not need endless expansion. A good career does not require 20 versions of yourself. It requires enough concentration for skill, trust, and reputation to deepen in the same direction year after year. The market eventually pays for that kind of depth because depth is rare. It is much rarer than enthusiasm. Think of your attention as capital. Now imagine you are allocating that capital like a careless banker, giving tiny loans to every charming borrower who walks through the door. A little to this dream, a little to that hobby, a little to a side project, a little to social status, a little to another certification, a little to endless content consumption disguised as learning. Soon your capital is everywhere, and your return is nowhere. There is no gravity, no center of force, no real compounding, just administrative clutter. I have always found that the highest returns in life come when you can identify a few things that truly matter and then stay with them longer than the culture considers exciting. That is the part people avoid. They want the fruits of concentration without the boredom of concentration. They want mastery without repetition. They want wealth without narrowing. They want the harvest without agreeing to plant in only a few fields. Life does not work that way. Every harvest is biased toward the farmer who had the discipline not to scatter his seeds across the entire countryside. The practical assignment is financial as well as personal. Take your 5 goals and ask which 1 or 2 are genuine drivers of long-term economic compounding. Which ones create earning power, ownership, trust, scarcity, or leverage? Then move resources toward those. More time, more study, more capital, more protection. Stop pretending every goal deserves equal funding. Equal funding is emotional laziness. Serious lives make hard allocations. Protect the core. Starve the periphery. The 4th rule is this: once you choose the 5, your next job is not merely to pursue them, it is to defend them. Selection without protection collapses under pressure. The world will not honor your priorities for you. Other people will volunteer your time, invade your attention, and recruit your energy for their purposes if you let them. And the danger is not only external. Your own moods will betray you. Boredom will betray you. Envy will betray you. Loneliness will betray you. Your desire to look interesting will betray you. That is why concentration must be guarded like a fortress. Most people fail here because they think clarity is enough. It is not. Clarity without defense is like building a beautiful house in a storm without a roof. The rain will get in. The 5 chosen goals need boundaries. They need systems. They need refusal. They need discipline strong enough to look cold from the outside. Many people fear this because they want to be seen as generous, available, dynamic, open-minded, easygoing. But there is a season in life when being easygoing is simply another word for being easily diverted. I have seen people do the hard part of deciding what matters only to sabotage themselves with weak boundaries. They say, family matters most, then give every strong hour of the day to shallow obligations and offer their loved ones the leftovers. They say health matters most, then negotiate with appetite every evening until the body becomes the bill collector of undisciplined living. They say building a great business matters most, then allow low-quality meetings, low-quality partnerships, and low-quality opportunities to consume the oxygen. They say wisdom matters most, then poison their minds with constant noise. They know the 5, they just never starve the 20. Imagine an engine. It can produce extraordinary power, but only if the fuel line is clean and protected. Now imagine poking 20 tiny holes in that line. None of them alone may seem catastrophic, but together they bleed the system dry. That is what distraction does. Not always one dramatic detour, often 20 tiny leaks, a little time here, a little ego there, a little comparison, a little vanity project, a little emotional drama, a little guilt-driven obligation. Eventually the engine still runs, but badly. It loses torque. It overheats. It performs below its design. The practical takeaway is simple and brutal. Build rules, not wishes. Decide in advance what the 20 avoid at all costs goals look like in daily life. Which invitations represent them? Which habits feed them? Which people awaken them? Which platforms inflame them? Which emotions make them sound reasonable again? Name the leaks, then close them. Remove easy access. Shorten the decision path. Protect the hours when your mind is strongest. A weak boundary is just delayed surrender. The cost of division is a divided life. The 5th rule is the deepest one. Scattered ambition does not only ruin outcomes, it fractures identity. You cannot live long in contradiction without paying for it in your mind. When a person says one thing matters but behaves as if 20 things matter, the inner world starts to rot. That rot shows up as anxiety, resentment, confusion, envy, fatigue, self-doubt, and the haunting sensation of being busy without becoming. This is why so many ambitious people feel mentally stuck. Their schedules are full, but their lives are not coherent, and without coherence, the soul becomes noisy. Most people fail here because they think conflict only exists outside of them. They blame the market, the boss, the economy, the lack of time, the stage of life, the family pressure, the competition. Sometimes those things are real. I do not dismiss them. But often the deeper conflict is internal. They are trying to serve too many gods at once. Comfort and greatness, approval and independence, status and truth, safety and scale, variety and mastery, immediate pleasure and long-term compounding. These things do not always live peacefully together. At some point you must decide who gets fed and who gets starved. I have found that character is revealed most clearly by what a person is willing to disappoint. Everyone says they have values. That means very little. Values become visible when keeping them costs something. When saying no costs access. When focus costs admiration. When devotion to the essential makes other people call you narrow, repetitive, obsessive, or less balanced. That is the test. A divided person will break under that pressure and go back to collecting scraps of approval. A serious person will accept the temporary loneliness of being misunderstood. Think of a steering wheel on a mountain road. If your hands keep twitching every time something catches your eye, the cliff will eventually collect its debt. Life is no different. Your attention cannot keep lunging toward every appealing object without consequence. A divided life feels rich at first because it is crowded with stimulation. But the richness is false. It is like eating sugar all day and calling it nourishment. What you gain in variety, you lose in direction. What you gain in applause, you lose in substance. What you gain in short-term emotional relief, you lose in long-term self-respect. The practical assignment is uncomfortable, which is why it matters. Look at your calendar, your spending, your emotional patterns, your conversations, your screen time, your habits of thought. Then ask one question with complete honesty. Does my life reflect my chosen five, or does it reflect my ungoverned appetites? Do not answer with intentions. Answer with evidence. Your life is already voting. Your schedule is the ballot. Your money is the ballot. Your attention is the ballot. Read the votes and stop lying to yourself. Now let me say the part that matters most. The 5/25 rule is not about efficiency. It is about courage. It takes courage to choose, because choosing is a confession of finitude. It means you are mortal. It means time is short. It means there are lives you will not live, rooms you will not enter, identities you will not wear, opportunities you will not touch. The immature mind resists this because it wants endless optionality. But endless optionality is the fantasy of someone who has not yet accepted that life is paid for with exclusion. To become one thing, you must refuse many things. To go deep, you must stop spreading. To build a life with gravity, you must stop orbiting every passing attraction. And let me make it even more practical, because many people hide from truth behind abstractions. If you say your marriage is one of your five, then flirtation, vanity, emotional affairs, constant overwork, and the pursuit of admiration outside the home belong on the avoid at all costs list. If health is one of your five, then late-night chaos, reward eating, alcohol-fueled networking, and every excuse that sounds mature but leaves the body neglected belong on that list. If building wealth is one of your five, then status spending, scattered investing, ego businesses, low-quality partnerships, and every shiny object dressed up as diversification belong there too. The rule is only useful if it becomes concrete. What destroys people is not always vice in its vulgar form. Often it is a series of respectable misalignments, a little more public image than substance, a little more social life than study, a little more reaction than strategy, a little more expansion than mastery, a little more pleasing than building. That is enough. You do not need a dramatic collapse when slow leakage can do the job just as well. I have also learned that the 20 avoided goals reveal your character as much as the 5 chosen ones. Anyone can say what they want. Far fewer can identify what they must refuse. That is where seriousness begins. A person who cannot say no with precision does not yet have a strategy. He has preferences. A person who keeps every option alive because she fears regret will often end up with the deepest regret of all, the regret of never going deep enough anywhere for life to answer back with force. There is another uncomfortable truth here. Some of the 20 will not be projects. They will be relationships, people you enjoy but who pull you sideways. People who make you smaller, noisier, weaker, more impulsive, more vain, more confused. You will tell yourself they are harmless because they are familiar. But a familiar leak is still a leak. The wrong companion can quietly dismantle a decade of compounding. The wrong partner can turn a disciplined life into a courtroom of constant emotional negotiation. Love does not remove the need for discernment. In many cases, it increases it. Trust is one of the most financially and spiritually consequential decisions a person makes. If this sounds harsh, it is because life is harsh with the unfocused. The world does not gently reward divided people. It strips them slowly, first of clarity, then of momentum, then of confidence, then of time. And time, once wasted, is not a debt you can easily repay. The young waste years assuming force can make up for drift. It cannot. The old often look back and realize the great tragedy was not that they lacked talent. It was that they fed too many half-desires and starved the few things that might have made life unmistakably meaningful. In the end, the 5/25 rule is really a moral rule disguised as a practical one. It asks whether you have the integrity to align your life with what you claim matters. It asks whether you are willing to disappoint the lesser self in order to serve the deeper one. It asks whether you can withstand the boredom, repetition, and occasional loneliness that serious focus requires. It asks whether you want a life that looks full or a life that is full. Those are not the same thing. And that is where this rises above money. Though money is certainly part of it, wealth is not just accumulation, it is alignment. It is the ability to direct your life toward what matters without constant internal war. It is having a mind that is not torn into pieces by appetite. It is having a calendar that reflects your values. It is having relationships that reinforce rather than corrode your chosen path. It is having enough honesty to admit that many good things are not your things. It is having enough discipline to treat minor attractions as major threats when they endanger major aims. So write the 25, circle the 5, then look at the remaining 20 with clear eyes. They are not innocent. They are not neutral. They are the almost good lives that would quietly steal the truly important one. Avoid them with more seriousness than most people reserve for obvious danger. Because the truth is not that your enemies are the things you hate. Your real enemies are often the things you enjoy just enough to keep around long after they have begun to cost you the life you said you wanted. At the end of your life, nobody will comfort you by saying you kept all your options open. Nobody will admire the elegance of your divided attention. What will matter is whether you had the courage to choose, the discipline to exclude, and the character to remain loyal to what mattered when everything else was asking for a piece of you. That is the game. Not more goals, not more motion, not more stimulation, fewer things, deeper roots, stronger walls, clearer judgment. Because a life becomes powerful the moment it stops trying to become everything. And what truly matters is not how many doors once stood open before you. It is whether you walked through the right one, closed it behind you, and built something inside that was worthy of your time, your trust, your love, and your one finite life.